You're welcome to the Policy Council. My name is Okweyemi Agbaje. In this edition, I talk to someone who is very passionate about the National Conference. He believes Nigeria is, in his words, fraud, and he wants legitimacy. He believes the alternatives to a conference are worse for everyone. It's a very interesting and explosive conversation. Enjoy the program. You're welcome back on the Policy Council. My guest today is a very fierce advocate of a national conference, or a sovereign national conference, or federalism, or its stronger alternatives. And he feels very passionate about these issues. I've invited him to the Policy Council so that we can exchange views on this. Mr. Tony Nnadi. He's a lawyer and is Secretary General of the Lower Niger Congress. You're welcome to the Policy Council.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with this national conference. Tell me, assume I don't understand why you want it. Why do you want a national conference?
Well, the story of Nigeria is too well known to bear reputation. How Lugard and his sponsors in London, grabbed various nationalities that were living their own lives in their various kingdoms, conquered them basically by pretending they were into some treaty of protection with each of them, Lagos being in 1861, and subsequently all the others. And as time went on, generally piecing them together into what became the protectorate of southern Nigeria. In the north, they were doing the same thing. And by 1914, they had come to the point where they could consolidate those treaties into one block, which they then called Nigeria. And in essence, created a country out of many peoples and without a discussion amongst those peoples whose ways are so totally different as oil and water that will not mix ordinarily. And for 100 years to date, from that 1914, we've not been able to find common ground because the British knew it was so, because the documents of the amalgamation which we have now show that they knew what they were doing from the first day, but they just needed this territory together for their own business interests.
Economic
and
interests.
even as at today, those business interests have not changed because the crude oil extraction that is the main business is still going on. And of the 3 million odd barrels of crude oil that Nigeria produces, more than 95% are still in the hands of Shell and its 5 sisters, controlled from the same quarters as it has always been. So we now come to the point where having been the southern part of the country was just bequeathed to the northern part, more or less annexing southern Nigeria to northern Nigeria. Structures created to make it permanent, such that in the week of independence in 1960, while the rest of the country went drinking champagne that the British were going, Ahmadu Bello was telling his lieutenants a different story. He said to them, and I'm quoting now, that the new nation called Nigeria should be an estate of our great-grandfather, Uthman Danfodio, and that on no account should that power equation be allowed to change. That we will use the middle belt as the minorities of the north, as the middle belt, as willing tools, and the south as a conquered territory. This was reported in the Parrot newspaper of 12th October 1960. And if you go to that, if you look closely at that one sentence, you will see a battle script,
a strategy document.
You will see a mission statement.
A mission statement.
A strategy document, like we said, which has been transformed into reality by the current constitution we have, in which there are 3 classes in the country: the owners of the country, their agents, the Gowons and Danjumas of this world, and the slaves from the conquered territory from the south, who ought not really be in any competition with the masters for who presides over the house. And that's what's playing out.
Tony, these are fascinating but controversial.
They are facts.
Statements.
They are
okay,
facts.
Let's take a short time out.
Okay.
So I can catch my breath.
Okay.
And then we'll be right back.
Hey, welcome, my son.
We are given free textbooks in our school today.
Hey, I thank God. Oh. I know with this Lagos State government free education, my son will end up being a lawyer or medical doctor. He can even become an educated automobile engineer. My son tell me, say, their school don't get beautiful building with a better chair and desk, new library, computer for everywhere, laboratory today, my people. All these things our children they enjoy today. Now our tax money do more. I they pay my tax.
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
Okay, so Tony, you welcome back viewers, but you can understand my state of mind. So Tony, now,
Yes.
you have this conspiracy theory approach to Nigeria.
Yes.
And your approach is that it was a conspiracy, in effect,
It was a fraud from the first day.
between the British
And their Fulani friends. The only comparison so that the viewers can understand what we're talking about. In 1910, the external colonialism that was in charge of South Africa traced back, and the apartheid was introduced. So while the whites in South Africa became independent of whoever was in control from afar, then they took charge over the rest of the people. The only difference between what we have now and the apartheid regime and the apartheid constitution of South Africa is that their own ordeal started in 1910. Ours started in 1914. But the basic element of a minority stranger population taking charge of the entire territory constitutionally by conquest and brutality, subterfuge and brute force, you know, is exactly the same. In their case, it was the Boers and the black owners of the land. In our case, it was the Fulanis working with their British friends versus the rest of us. And that is how we landed into the kind of constitution that has made us second-class citizens. In fact,
Tony, I know a little bit of Nigerian history.
Yes,
Let me
yeah.
contest your point of view.
Go ahead.
Our independence constitution
Yes.
was a federalist constitution.
Yes.
It was indeed, with the benefit of hindsight,
Yes.
close to a confederation, a three-region confederation,
Yes.
close to it. But we did so. No, if the British had wanted to create this apartheid
Yes.
overlordship that you're describing, they would have created a unitary constitution in which they place power in the hands of the Fulanis, as you say.
Well, if we had some more time, I would have placed right on the table here the documents that showed what they did, because we have them all now. We had to get into their archives by every means. They consciously created a situation in which the rest of the country put together will not be able to compete.
Totally agree with that. In terms of size, in terms of
the regional
the constitution of the federal parliament,
the
population figures.
the population was rigged to create that phantom majority that has remained in charge of the rest of us to date. Because when the census was taken between 51 and 50, it became controversial because they got the figures, but they had to pad it for one side and reduce for the other side, and then created parliamentary seats to bring about this majority from that minority, because the North at the time was not more than 17% of the country's population. Yes, they had land mass. The land mass is still there, it hasn't changed. But what are we talking about in terms of representation? Is it not human beings that are to be represented? They just,
how do you
they
these
gerrymandered
statements?
it.
Okay,
We have the documents are here
the
now.
famous
They were classified
revelations of
documents.
Harold Smith or
Yes,
something.
there are many more. In fact, the documents have been officially declassified now. At the time of Harold, it was still classified. But by the time we were getting ready to call the ethnic nationalities together for PRONACO, it was we had to go to the archives to bring out the facts of what was hidden. And from what we saw, it was easier for us to, go to disentangle all of the entanglements that were deliberately created. And today, what was done by fiat, had been legitimized more or less and made permanent in a constitution that has 36 states as federating units, and of those 36, 19 were to come from one side, and we had at independence
And local government 774.
yes, going back to the 3 regions that are federated. How come the one northern region of that time has produced 19 states plus federal capital territory? The western region of the time which had the federal capital of Lagos, now 6 or so, and the eastern side like that, we've come to where what was planned to be
has been institutionalized.
And that is what brought all the agitations for which this conference has become inevitable.
Let's take another time out. I'm having this, I think, explosive, but probably rational conversation with Mr. Tony Nnadi. He advocates federalism, maybe confederalism, and certainly is in support of a national conference. We'll be right back.
Government wants our city to become a mega modern city. And so, government is providing modern markets for us to carry out our business. Now, this requires money. So, we need to pay our taxes to help government to help us. I pay my taxes. I hope you've paid yours. I pay. Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
You're welcome back. I have Mr. Tony Nnadi. He's a lawyer. He's a nationalist and who seeks a reconfigured Nigeria. So, Tony, so you want this conference, and President Jonathan has agreed, and he set up this Dr. Okumu panel, who have recommended some things. What's your attitude to their recommendations, as which you may have become aware of?
Yeah, it's public knowledge because they've put it on the table. We looked at all of it. There's nothing to be taken from it. 4,000 pages of bunkum, absolute trash and nonsense. Why do I say so? The only thing we can get from their work is the fact that as they went round, it was evident that most Nigerians wanted a renegotiation of the union. They are eager to go to get things reconstructed. But beyond that, there were 7 points in terms of reference. You take them one after the other, and you discover that the committee either did not understand what they were asked to do, or that mediocrity had crept into our midst so much that they do not know what to do. In which case, you were talking about, for instance, the matter of representation.
I was shocked at that, on the basis of the
matter of representation.
House of Representatives.
The matter of representation. The quarrel is about the structure we have in place.
You then say we should use that
How
structure.
did we come about 36 states or the derivatives from it, which is a federal constituency for state, for Senate or House, and all of the council areas, whatever part of it you want to use. Between the 36 states were created, it started with Gowon, then Murtala Mohammed.
Gowon still did 12 in the north, 6 in the north and 6 in the south.
What was the date of creating that? The states were created to sabotage.
As a preemptive move against Biafra.
To stop Biafra from. So these states were created for a negative purpose. And they've not achieved anything other than that. I
totally agree.
And we built, instead of immediately dismantling it as soon as the war was over, which was there was a constitution drafted to guide the first transition from Gowon to civilian rule, which Murtala Mohammed found a way to subvert, throw away Gowon. And the first thing Murtala Mohammed did was to get Rotimi Williams to draft a constitution that will, put together all of what they had gained in the war and make it a constitutional document.
Permanent.
You saw where Benoit Beze, the professor, I don't know who taught him his own jurisprudence, was boasting in 2013 how he was part of the team that Rotimi Williams put together to draft that constitution ahead of what became the ahead of what became the Constituent Assembly, and it was at that point that unitarism was formalized, because when in 1966 the 5 constitutions that defined Nigeria, got toppled, you could say that the interregnum, the period between 66 and 79, was a period of quarrel. But at the time we were settling that quarrel back to democracy, the constitution that was put in place was again a fraud, in the sense that it was first drafted before. That was why Chief Awolowo stayed away. I was told this by actual participant, Prince Bankole Oki of Lagos, the senior advocate, who said that he told me what happened in the period, for which reason Chief Awolowo stayed away from the Constituent Assembly. And
the Constitution Drafting Committee.
Yes, for Professor Benoit Beze to suggest in this 21st century that one constitution is what a federation will use, for me, is heresy at law. For him to suggest that our sovereignty now vests in government, I don't know who taught him that. For him to suggest that we should write down the outcome of a meeting before the meeting is called, and all of that.
So what would you like to see?
We have to work with reality. If what we are asking for does not happen, I can assure you that the owners of the various blocks of land that Lugard merged together have already worked out the formations in which they will leave the union. And if you look back at the American War College report of June 2013, they were practically telling their home government that Nigeria has collapsed into 4 countries. And I am happy to be associated with the move to dissolve Nigeria peacefully if we cannot agree. And if from 1967 to date we cannot agree on how to go back to the basis of our unity, because there was something agreed in 1954 which we call federalism, which simply means a union of constitutions. The same way you have Germany and France and Portugal, the European Union. The kind of constitution Chief Awolowo had, by which he performed the miracles he performed in Western region, and which Okpara had in the East, which Sedona had in the North, you know, what happened to them? They were all thrown away. Let
me take a time out, and I'll challenge you on one fact that sometimes suggests to me that we also, contrary to the British Fulani conspiracy, we also had some input in subverting federalism. We'll be right back.
My name is Laide Awoyemi. I dey live for Lagos. You see as our new Lagos just defined the go. Good thing good though. To go market now, no hard at all. Just pay. Sit down inside BRT bus. Small time, you don't reach where they go. Hospital nko, the full ground. And for me and my pikin where I just born, treatment now free. You look left, you look right. Them they build new roads, new hospitals, new schools, new things everywhere. Everywhere they shine, gone. We thank God though. But come on, I hear saying that this tax money will they pay. I think then they used to do all these good things. Me, they pay my own tax. Say they pay your own.
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
You're welcome back. It's the final segment of my conversation with Mr. Tony Nadi, a lawyer, an advocate of a restructured Nigeria. Tony, one of my concerns is that narrative about subjugation and all is countered by the fact that Chief Awolowo and Dr. Azikiwe in particular seemed rather preoccupied with federal power, while Ahmadu Bello seemed sanguine about it. He disdained it and sent his deputy to Lagos. Well, how does that contradict your logic?
It doesn't contradict it in any way. Those two men who have been propped up as heroes of all persons and all times, not to take anything away from either of them. Azikiwe fought the British to a standstill with his intellect. Awolowo, so beautiful was his outing in Western region,
the West,
that the Prime Minister of the UK at the time, Harold Wilson, did say that he was more eminently qualified to be Prime Minister of UK, that is Awolowo, or the President of the United States. But in the Eastern Nigeria of yesterday and today, he's not my hero, because he presided over the killing of 3.5 million people just for the Nigeria to be retained, so that he and those who work with him can preside over it. That's the truth.
That's another controversy.
Yes,
but let's go on with
the account of what happened is now with us.
Yes. Okay. So let's go on with, because obviously we can degenerate into another national conference there. But let's go into the anniversary of the centenary.
Those who are planning to celebrate now are going to meet another kind of celebrants on the streets. In 1914, when our enslavement was consummated, there was Doba in Sokoto, in Kano, in Zungeru, whereas in Lagos there was mourning and almost protestation. The rest of the southern Nigeria were lamenting some terrible thing that had befallen them. Now, 100 years after, we've come to where the full lifespan of the amalgamation is gone, and we are talking about options before Nigeria, which is either to dissolve peacefully or to return the autonomy of everybody to their satisfaction.
Or to find some basis
of that's why I say return the autonomy within the union. That's to go back to Aburi or to go off to Araba. We're closer to Araba now because in the last 10, 12, almost 15 years, we've been working out.
For some viewers who don't understand Araba.
Araba is to your tent.
Which was the ideology of the 1966.
Yes, the North bolted out of Nigeria when they saw what was happening in 1966. The point at which they now turned so much as to say one Nigeria forever, including now, is what we need to go back to examine. But the new thing, in addition to all of what we were complaining about, was the Sharia that came in year 2012, contiguous states of the uppermost north passed Sharia law, later bringing Boko Haram to enforce it. And that makes it impossible for me to function from Sokoto or Kano or Maiduguri. Whereas Lamido Sanusi can govern central bank sitting in Lagos. His younger brother.
These are controversial statements.
No, but these are truths. I can't, because of Sharia, I can't function from, I won't move my business to Maiduguri today. But Lamido Sanusi can come from his Kano and govern central bank in Lagos in peace. And his younger brother can sit in Port Harcourt and govern Chevron in peace. And I say I'm being shortchanged. I'm saying I will not take it. Because
so what do we do now?
What we do is to do what South Africa did in 1990, where after 80 solid years, the sitting government of Frederick de Klerk acknowledged that the apartheid constitution was no longer able to sustain the society, and called a meeting of the owners of the land, a meeting of everybody, to decide a new constitutional arrangement. It took them 5 years. They called it CODESA, a sovereign conference. And in that period, suspended all elections. Today, I hear people talking about elections of 2015 as if Nigeria must remain there, whatever anybody says. They are going to be shocked by what they will see in the coming days, because that Nigeria that is defined by force, that Nigeria that is defined by the 1999 Constitution, and I was surprised to see the American ambassador talking with Jega day before yesterday or so about how much America is going to support him for the election of 2015 to promote democracy. Except the definition, the definition of democracy will change.
Tony, what if we do this conference
if the United States does not see anything wrong with
what if
using this apartheid constitution to run a democracy?
What if we do this conference in 6 months of 2014?
Yes.
As is being proposed by the conference.
By those who are eager to get to government house.
February.
In 1964, before we get, I see where you're going. In 1960, the elections were advertised for 1964. Law and order had broken down. The constitution of Western Region had collapsed in 1962. The sensible thing to do was to defer the election of 64 and save the blood of those who had to die because that election had. But the politicians were eager to get to government house. And they loaded an election on top of an unsettled constitutional,
and then
the thing exploded just by referendum.
This is so what you want is a referendum.
We go to the conference in 2 stages. In 2 stages.
At the local level.
A federation is a union of constitutions. I'm telling you what must be done. A federation is a union of constitutions. We lost our way because we abandoned.
So you want the 2 levels of negotiation?
Yes. Let those who will federate meet in their regions first. It may take 6 months or 8 months or 1 year
and then
to work out the constitutions
level
that will federate. The meeting at the center will only be a meeting of 3-4 constitutions that are already prepared.
And then,
anything short of that.
And then a referendum.
And then a referendum to ratify it. The National Assembly has no role.
We'll be right back. I believe Nigeria can be a win-win for all Nigerians. I have probably a more sober attitude towards Nigeria. I think it can work. I think we can calmly renegotiate Nigeria. And I think we can find a formula that works for all. However, I agree with my guests, we have to have that discussion, or else the alternatives may be worse. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.